All right, it's 9:02. All right, good morning all. This is the first meeting of the Energy Resilience and Efficiency Working Group as part of the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. I'm Andrew Place. We'll go around for introductions. I'll ask Cindy to work through the members that are on here. Just to note that this is being recorded. This is also a public meeting, and we'll have time set aside at the end of this meeting and all meetings for public comment. And we're also, not only will be recording it, but we are also taking minutes, and those will be placed on the website for the work group. Can I be heard okay? Any issues with hearing me? All right, hearing none. As I said, yeah, I'm Andrew Place. I'm here at MDE. I'm a senior advisor. I'm former vice chairman of the Public Utility Commission in Pennsylvania. Jeff, I see you're having issues. And also former deputy secretary of Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection, also a recovering academic. I was on the research faculty at Carnegie Mellon University back in the day in the Department of Engineering and Public Policy. With that, I'll ask Cindy to start working through the members that are on the call today. You could provide who you are, who you're with, and your role. That would be of great help. Thank you very much. Cindy, it's all yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Cindy Osordo, and I'm also with the Maryland Department of the Environment. I'm in the climate change program, and I'm really excited to be working with everyone here. We can work through the member list and.
Well, you want to work from who's on the call or not?
Yeah, we can do that.
Or is it easier to do the list?
We can start with Mr. Jeff Shaw.
All right, Jeff is having issues. Do you want to read out his? Yeah, Jeff's having issues with his mic at the moment, so I will read that he's dropping in texts into the chat. So you can see, I'll read it for you. Jeff Shaw, Vice President of Distributed Energy and Sustainability at SMECO. So thank you, Jeff. I hope you can work through the mic issues momentarily. Next on the list.
Mr. Landon Farrig.
Good morning, Landon Farrig. I am the Assistant Division Director for Energy Policy at the Maryland Energy Administration and designee of the Director, Paul Pinsky.
Thank you, Landon.
Mr. Hoover.
Hi, I'm Fred Hoover. I'm the chair of the Maryland Public Service Commission.
Delegate. Good morning. Delegate Lorig Charkoudian.
Good morning, everyone. Delegate Lorig Charkoudian, state delegate serving on the Public Utilities Subcommittee, and excited for this conversation, and apologize I need to sign off at 10 today because I had something else previously scheduled, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate.
Mr. Mark Suka.
Good morning, everybody. I am Mark Zuka. I work for Potomac Edison, which is an electric transmission and distribution utility in Western Maryland, and part of parent company First Energy. I'm an engineer by education. I've worked in engineering and operations for Potomac Edison, and currently work in regulatory affairs in the state of Maryland.
Good morning, Mark.
Mr. Maurice Simpson.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Maurice Simpson Jr., Senior Manager of State and Regulatory Affairs at Constellation Energy. We are the nation's largest producer of clean, carbon-free electricity, and own the largest fleet of nuclear power plants, including Calvert Cliffs down here in Lugsby. And I am one of the nuclear industry representatives.
Thank you.
Did I miss any members?
I just wanted to hop in. I'm Bridget O'Toole. I'm Senator Katie Freihester's legislative director. She's at a community event this morning, so she couldn't make it, but I'm here on behalf of her.
All right, thank you. Appreciate you being here. Any other members that have not introduced themselves?
Hi, this is Nancy Sopko from US Wind. I'm new, so I might be a member, but just thought I'd introduce myself. I'm the head of external affairs here at US Wind. We're an offshore wind developer based in Baltimore, Maryland.
All right. Yes, you are a member, Nancy. Thank you. Good morning. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. All right. So you all should have had both the agenda as well as today's presentations. They're on the web page. I hope you're able to see those. And in future, that is where we will post meeting notices, etc. Just a brief background, most of you, if not all of you, will be familiar, of course, with the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, and that this work group is an offshoot of that was statutorily obligated, mandated by the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. There had been 4 work groups: adaptation, science, education, as well as greenhouse gas mitigation. Those are the standing ones that have been here since the origin of the Commission on Climate Change. The 4 new ones are Just Transition, Employment, and Retaining Work Group. The Energy Industry Revitalization, which is coming up this afternoon. I'm chairing that as well. We are doing these. I'm doing both of these on the same day every 4 weeks. And then the one we were meeting on today, of course, Energy Resilience and Efficiency Working Group. And then there's a Solar Photovoltaic Systems Recovery, Reuse, and Recycling Work Group. As I noted, I intend to run these every 4 weeks, not monthly, but every 4 weeks. The list is in the PowerPoint presentation. One note, and we will get to it later on this morning, is if we are going to make recommendations, I would like to see us tee those up, at least draft form, in the the August 13th meeting, which is quick, but I think we can get there if there is an interest in coming together on recommendations to the full commission. And also, I can't present while I'm also reading the chats, but Cindy, if you can bring anything to my attention to be made aware of.
Yeah, so there's just a few members that might be introducing themselves in the chat. So I introduced myself, and Stephanie Wilcox is a student with Dr. Ben Hobbs at Johns Hopkins University. So we might just have a few introductions coming in through chat.
Okay, thank you very much. And the charge of this work group is broad and it's not constrained. And I would always take the view that the work group can be expansive in what the legislative intent was of this work group, but really focus on the resilience piece, the efficiency piece, and battery storage, etc. Just to reiterate, I think highly of the folks that are on this call in this work group, and pulling this brain trust together to make recommendations, I think, is fundamentally important. And we can take our charge to be quite broad within those very generic categories. With that, I would move quickly. Are there questions on where we stand on meetings coming up? We will, towards the end of this agenda this morning, work through what the body of work should look like. Again, as I noted, the chair should not drive that discussion. I'm salting the mind on what the work product should be coming out of this, other than the statutorily obligated study, which Ben Hobbs will get into momentarily at Johns Hopkins. I don't view that this should be driven from the chair. I think this should clearly be driven from the those that are on the work group, and it may be, on the other side of the coin, disrespectful if I were to, as the chair, set the body of work and the process going forward. So with that, I would note that that's the last item on our agenda. We have 25 minutes set aside for that, the third of this meeting. But I wanted to make that very clear up front. And please note if there's objections to that perspective, but to reiterate and make it very, very clear, you all of us together should be driving the process of what we accomplish over the next 6 or 8 months left in the year. With that, Cindy has a presentation prepared for us on the broad overview of the Pollution Reduction Act plan that came out of Maryland Department of the Environment in December of 2023. So with that, Cindy, the floor is yours.
Great. So I'll be giving a broad overview on the Maryland Climate Pollution Reduction Plan that came out in December. This is a plan that built upon previous plans. Just so that you're all aware, previous plans have been shaped and influenced by the work of the Maryland Climate Change Commission. So this is a great opportunity, being part of this working group, to provide recommendations, to provide feedback as we move along. So I'm super excited to have you guys here. So a law in Maryland passed in 2022 called the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. It required our agency and DE to create a climate pollution reduction plan. This built upon the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act plan and set new statewide goals that included reaching 60% greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2031 compared to 2006 levels, and then set the states on a path to achieve net zero emissions by 2045. And importantly, the Maryland law also has a requirement that the plan create economic benefits to the state. So there was also an economic analysis that was done. The plan is over 100 pages long. It's available on our website. Highly recommend that you guys check it out. So the plan modeled current policies as well as planned policies. And this was the collective effort of various state agencies across various sectors. This is the most ambitious goal, statewide goal, greenhouse gas reduction goal in the country. The really great news is that the pathways to achieve these ambitious goals do exist. And one note is that the 2031 goal is a gross goal, and the 2045 goal is set by statute as a net goal, which means that it may include carbon sequestration, which is the little red piece on the right-hand side here. The majority of the emissions will be coming from the 2 largest sectors, electricity, transportation, and we're going to be going over that through this presentation. In the graph here, it is yellow and purple. But really, this is economy-wide, so we're looking across sectors, we're looking across different strategies. So in 2022, we met all of our air quality standards since the Clean Air Act was established over 50 years ago. And I'm sorry if there's someone trying to join, just letting them in. All right. And really, this is great news. We have already proven in Maryland that we can achieve clean air quality goals and standards, and we can build off of this progress through our continued efforts on our climate goals and our climate policies. So at this point, I'm going to be moving into covering three sectors: electricity, transportation, and buildings. We'll start off with the electricity sector. This sector has seen some of the largest emissions reductions since 2006, including due to the reduction in coal. We are making progress in replacing fossil fuels, but this graph does show that we need to continue expanding our renewable and clean energy in the states. And one of the pieces that's included in our plan is the governor's commitment to reach 100% clean energy by 2035. So what that means within the electricity sector is that we'll continue to invest in large-scale actions, but we're also encouraging small-scale actions such as individual actions such as buying an electric vehicle, an electric heat pump when an old system breaks down. That is part of a greater trend that is occurring not just in Maryland, but across the country, commonly referred to as electrification. Heat pumps in particular have come a long way in providing comfort. Technologically speaking, they have made advancements in efficiency, and they are already outselling gas furnaces. Some of the best-selling cars in 2023 did include electric vehicles like the Tesla Model Y, Tesla Model 3, and the Chevy Volt. And then just generally across the board, our appliances and vehicles will be increasingly powered by clean electricity. One of the common questions that people ask regarding electrification regards reliability. And that was also considered in the climate plan. And in particular, the Climate Solutions Now Act required our Maryland Public Service Commission to conduct a study on the reliability and electrification of the grid. And I would encourage you to check out that report as well. It also came out in December. So moving on to transportation, this is the largest emitting sector in our state. Decarbonization of the transportation sector will involve both public and private vehicles moving away from fossil fuel burning internal combustion engines and towards zero emission vehicles. What that involves specifically within Maryland is that there are policies in place. And we're continuing to build off of some of our policies. That includes the Advanced Clean Cars 2 policy, which requires 100% of new cars, light duty trucks, and sport utility vehicles sold in Maryland to be ZEVs, zero emission vehicles, by 2035, and Advanced Clean Trucks policy, which requires certain types of medium and heavy duty trucks sold in Maryland to be ZEVs in certain years. In addition to electrifying vehicle fleets, reducing vehicle miles traveled is also being explored. That could mean expanding access and affordability of public transit options, as well as creating walkable and bikeable local spaces. So having more electric vehicles in our grid does mean that we also need the infrastructure to support those vehicles. That means that we need to reduce any range anxiety that might be occurring by making sure that we have reliable charging networks. And in Maryland, we already have over 1,500 public charging stations. And we are expanding. We are leveraging state and federal funding to expand this network even further. through the work of our state agencies, including the Maryland Energy Administration, MDE, MDOTS, and as one example, the Maryland Clean Energy Center has also been investing in new electric vehicle infrastructure. The third section that I'll be covering is the buildings sector. This is one of the sectors that has one of the largest policies in the Climate Solutions Now Act, and that is called Building Energy Performance Standards, and we commonly refer to that as BEPS. BEPS is a regulation aimed at decarbonizing large buildings over 35,000 square feet over time, 20% reduction by 2030, and net zero by 2040. There are over 9,000 covered buildings in Maryland across various counties, various types of buildings, and this regulation is aiming to encourage and require energy efficiency and other measures to reduce emissions from those buildings. The plan also touches on some other new policies. Notably, there is the Clean Heat Standard and the Zero Emission Heating Equipment Standard, and MDE has begun the process of developing those regulations. I will not go too deep into those policies. As I mentioned earlier, everything is included in the plan, but the broad overview is that CHES, Zero Emission Heating Equipment Standard, will require new heating systems installed in Maryland to produce zero on-site emissions beginning not tomorrow, but later this decade. This means that we'll have more electric water heaters and heat pumps for space heating and cooling. That means new technologies, falling prices, and robust federal, state, and utilities supported incentives can align with this policy over time. Ultimately, for the purpose of having energy efficient, low cost, zero emission buildings across the board in Maryland. The other big policy is the Clean Heat Standard. It is a performance-based approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector. It's meant to be applied in a way that covers certain sectors and is market-based and friendly to customer choice and coordination with other programs. And that could include energy codes and standards, Empower, BEPS, and CHES. It would be something that that you can stay tuned to in the coming months, in the coming years. So why are we doing this? As I mentioned early on, we are required by law to provide, yes, greenhouse gas emission savings, but also an economic benefit to the states. And our plan did find exactly that. This means that we will be able to produce more jobs. That means we will be able to produce good quality jobs and just grow the economy as a whole. And that could include electricians, that could include HVAC technicians. And we are aiming to support these jobs in a way that is equitable and considers our Governor Moore's call to leave no one behind. The other great benefit of electrification when designed thoughtfully for our states is that it can lower energy costs. It can put money back into the pockets of our ratepayers. Emission savings and energy savings means that our individuals that might be low and moderate income consumers are spending less money on heating and cooling their homes and more money into the economy as a whole. There are a lot of incentives already available from federal sources. The U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act provide various incentives that customers today can already access. And there will also be incoming state level incentives. And as a whole, this means that consumers will be able to more easily afford solar panels, electric vehicles, the infrastructure for their vehicles, heat pumps, energy audits across the board. There is a lot of incentives already available and more underway. This is just a list of a few of the different incentives that you can expect from federal sources. One big piece that the plan does mention is that there is more funding at the state level that would need to become available in order to meet all of our goals. And so there are a few different policies that are explored in the plan. The plan does call for $1 billion to fund our mitigation efforts. And so these are just a few examples of the potential strategies that the state could take. It is an important conversation because there are state budget deficits and because we don't want to leave Marylanders behind. Ultimately, we will be able to invest in building electrification, transitioning to electric vehicles, industrial electrification, workforce development, and all across the board in different sectors. But we do need leadership, and that is part of the call for this working group, is to have thoughtful conversations as to how we can invest in a responsible way. And this is just highlighting again some of the benefits. We would have 27,000 jobs. We would have $2.5 billion in total personal income increases and $5.3 billion increases, $5.3 billion increase in GDP by 2031. This is not a zero-sum game. We can have a healthy economy and a healthy environment. And then another reason, in addition to the environmental and economic impacts, is health benefits. We do work, I do work for MDE, and one of our core pieces of our mission is protecting public health. There will be health benefits from implementation of this plan. That means less asthma cases, reduced cancer rates, increased life expectancy, and just overall better public health for our overburdened communities. We are doing this not just for ourselves today and our vulnerable individuals, but also for future generations. And as I mentioned earlier, we've already made a lot of progress in Maryland, and we can continue building off our progress. This does have benefits for ourselves, but also global benefits. Emissions are not local in nature. We are contributing to global emissions, but also we can contribute to global emission reductions, and we can be a global leader and set an example for others across the country and perhaps even the world. So next steps. We will, as the states continue to maximize federal funding opportunities, we will continue in our regulatory processes. We'll be launching and implementing various new regulations. We'll be coordinating with the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, including this working group, and will be evaluating funding mechanisms. Are there any questions?
Well, I'll jump in and note that two things. On the funding side, there's the federal EPA climate pollution reduction grant program that we have, as noted here. Maryland has submitted into 4 buckets for that funding opportunity. Relevant for this conversation, there is a partnership with New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, and Maryland for heavy and medium duty truck charging, vehicle charging. That's about a $400 million ask. Maryland would obviously get some subset of that. We expect that grant either to be awarded or not awarded, adjudicated by July, as well as there's 15 states led by Hawaii that Maryland's in partnership with for resiliency on public buildings. And if that were to come through, that's expected to be about $33 million for renewable power with backup battery generation storage to support that. So those are certainly, I just bring those up as those are currently what's right in front of us and yet to be determined. And we'll keep you all abreast of if those do come in the July time horizon. Questions on Cindy's presentation?
If you want to learn more about the CPRG, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant that Andrew just mentioned, our agency does have a website available, and I put that in the chat.
All right. Next on our agenda, the statutes that established this working group has an obligation, a remit for a study. We have brought on Professor Hobbs and his team at Johns Hopkins. Thank you. Sorry, my apologies, Ben. And we've teed up with a work plan, what that could look like. But I did also, this should be an opportunity for the work group members to, after the presentation, to offer perspectives on whether this does capture what is not only the remits, the statutory remit, but if there are missing pieces that we should bring into this study. So with that, Professor Hobbs, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Andrew, for inviting me to describe our work that is to support the working group's charge. And I'm Ben Hobbs, a professor of environmental management at Johns Hopkins, and I represent the JHU team that has been engaged by MDE and the University of Maryland to provide analysis and support of, and in parallel to the working group's work this year. This work, which this year, which of course is already 1/3 of the way over, it's going to be very busy, and we're really excited by this. I will present a short introduction to who we are, the goals of the study, and questions that this working group can help us answer as we do this work. And that will be the last slide. So briefly first, who am I? Oh, I should share a screen. Pardon me. Can I? Yeah. Turns out, it looks like I can't share my screen, but do you want to show the slides from your end, Andrew?
Yeah, we can do that.
Or I can share mine, whatever's most convenient.
And Professor Hobbs' slides will be posted to the web page following this meeting.
Yeah, they're already up there. So
I Thank you.
So if you want to cheat and look ahead, you're welcome to. First, who am I? At Hopkins, I teach and do research in energy systems and policy. I've done a lot of work for MDE in the past. I also belong to the Climate Change Commission Mitigation Work Group and co-chair ACAC for MDE. I also chair, and this is relevant, the California Market Surveillance Committee, where the focus there is enabling the California market's transition through technology and reform market rules to facilitate the energy transition, which is, of course, happening all over the nation as well. The other people in this, Yuri is the co-director of the project that's supported by MDE and the University of Maryland to support this working group. And Dr. Mertosh is the person who has been in charge of developing the HOPE-MD model, which is an important tool in this analysis. And HOPE-MD was supported by the Maryland Energy Administration in cooperation with the Maryland Energy Environmental Service. So we can go down to the next slide. So this reviews the goal and a little bit more about the team. So again, our goal is to provide analyses to support your mission, which is to advise the Climate Change Commission on issues and opportunities related to energy infrastructure improvements, transmission efficiency improvement, and battery backup viability. So we're focusing on solutions to improve resiliency of the grid, which of course is very much in the news these days with the Brandon Shores and the PJM RTEP and so forth. And in general, we'll be advising the Commission on issues and opportunities related to energy infrastructure improvements. I've introduced myself and Professor Dvorkin, and we have 3 or 4 students. And I'm sorry, let's see, Tomas, I believe, is not listed here and should have been. Ziting, Stephanie, and Boyu are all PhD students in our program who will be helping out this year, and they're very excited for to be involved in this real-world application that will, we hope, be very helpful to the state of Maryland. This is not an academic study. The team that created the tool is Madi, who led a couple PhD students, Shen Wang and Zhou Song. Next slide. This work is done from within ROSI, which is the Ralph O'Connor Sustainable Energy Institute, which has 4 missions. One is to capture carbon. The second is take an integrated approach to energy systems that's looking at all sectors of the energy economy, and especially how clean electricity can help decarbonize transportation, industry, and buildings, which, as you know, is a very important part of the Maryland CCC plan. We have a group that's very much focused on the grid, and that's the group that I belong to. And an objective is not only to do this efficiently and reliably, but also equitably. At the bottom, we show some of the, mention some of the efforts that we're involved with. I direct a global center funded by Australia, the US, and the UK on electricity innovation for a carbon-free society. That's EPICS. Arrow is an offshore wind research and education organization led by the University of Massachusetts and ourselves. And we work closely with 6 of the world's power system operators who already are managing power systems with 30 to 50% variable renewables, wind and solar. This includes not only California and Texas, but also Denmark, Ireland, Australia, and the UK. And there are a lot of lessons because PJM will eventually get there as well. And I want to thank again Maryland Energy Administration and the Maryland Environmental Service for having funded the development of the HOPE-MD tool, which is the subject of the next slide, and is going to be the main tool that we'll be using for our analyses of efficiency and resilience. A focus of HOPE, which if you want to learn more about it, just point your phone at the graphic on the right. The goal of this analysis will be to look at both investment in batteries, both the lithium-ion 4-hour batteries that we're seeing today, as well as the longer duration batteries that we would need in the future. Look at their investment and look at how they're operated to maximize efficiency, resiliency of grid operations in Maryland. We'll be looking at not only their value over time, but the value in different locations. HOPE MD has a simplified representation of the transmission limits in the Maryland grid and between Maryland and, of course, the other states within PJM that we buy so much power from. And hopefully we'll be exporting a lot of renewables too as our renewable capabilities grow. We'll be identifying existing power plant sites, perhaps such as Brandon Shores, for effective deployment, looking at the advantages and disadvantages of different sites, with a firm eye on the system-wide benefits, cost reductions, emissions reductions, and making recommendations based on that. HOPE NB was built as a tool that we would actually like to put on your computers. Sorry, not as spam or malware, but if you want to use the model yourself, that's the reason MEA funded it, was to provide something that stakeholders could use to explore different transition scenarios themselves, different transition strategies. There are two modes in which we can use this. One is simply take some build-out scenario over 20, 30 or more years and say, how would it be operated? What would be the performance of that? This can be done just for Maryland or for the whole PJM system, because how much we import and how much we export will, of course, depend on our decisions as well as what's going on elsewhere in PJM in terms of technology and regulations. There's also the generation transmission expansion planning mode, where the model will suggest investments that could facilitate the transition, that things that would be a cost-effective way to achieve emissions and other goals that you might specify. So this is not a model that's going to say you should definitely do this, but rather, oh, here are some things that you might consider which could support the goals, some more investment alternatives. An important feature, the last bullet here, is that we represent in detail the state level emissions and renewable policies that support transition paths. And so surely those policies will evolve a lot over the coming decades, just as they have over the last 20 years. And you can explore what the implications could be of different policies here in Maryland, as well as elsewhere in PJM. As we hopefully successfully get more states to join EREWG, or we see renewable portfolio standards tightening elsewhere, or we see growth in data centers and changes in low carbon procurement policies by the owners of those centers, those are the sort of things that will definitely have an impact on Maryland and our ability to achieve our goals. So the last slide. These are the sort of questions that we would very much like to interact with the expertise on this working group, because you folks know an awful lot more about, those of you, for example, from Potomac Electric or Constellation or SMECO know a lot more about your systems than we do in terms of transmission issues, resource issues, load growth. So we'll want to, and then there are representatives from the wind industry and so forth who know what's coming and happening in terms of technology. But at any rate, the type of questions will concern what are the goals? That's what I mean by criteria and technology characterizations. What criteria would you use to evaluate whether what's a good transition plan or what's one that's less desirable? So resiliency, just like equity, is something that's talked about a lot, but different people mean different things by it. And one advantage of taking a modeling approach to addressing these questions is that it makes us focus and try to be specific and allows us to explore the implications of different definitions of these criteria for what investments might be made and how they might be operated. The model will also help us identify what cost dimensions, for example, perhaps the cost of 20-hour batteries or 40-hour batteries, what cost dimensions might be key in facilitating the transition, or unfortunately might be major obstacles. And we can identify where cost reductions might be most helpful. Scenarios are really important because the only thing we know for sure is that any projection we make is wrong. Think about where we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. When I worked with the Maryland Power Plant Research Program as a student in 1976, at that time, the National Academy of Sciences said geothermal was going to be the major source of renewables in the future American power system, and they poo-pooed the idea of extensive wind deployment. A lot has happened since 1977, and a lot will happen in the future. Hopefully good surprises, hopefully no more 3 Mile Island 2 type of things. And it's important to be designing a system that if the ball is hit to your left or to your right, you're going to be able to move and adapt the system and still achieve the goals that you need to achieve over the next 20 or 30 years. That raises the question of what investments should be made now that place the system in a good place to adapt as we get surprised by future developments. At any rate, these can all be the subject of a group discussion now or at some other time, or one-on-one meetings. We're very happy to interact with the working group in any way that is most convenient and productive for you all. And we're very much looking forward to input on not only these questions, but on any aspect of the work that we'll be doing. And we'll be back to talk about the work as it progresses. So thanks again for the invitation to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to the remainder of the discussion this morning. Should we take some questions or go on to the next item on the agenda? I'm very happy to answer questions if there are any.
Can you hear us?
All right. I'm not sure if Ben can hear us, but Delegate Charkoudian?
Yes, thank you. I can hear you. Hi, Ben. Professor, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I'm looking forward to digging deeper into it. I think one of the things that I'm interested in and that I'm hoping is part of this conversation, and I'm wondering if you can talk about how it's part of this modeling, is really doing more sort of integrated planning in specifically around concepts of bidirectional charging and thinking about resiliency and grid balancing from the EVs that will be out there, from the hot water heaters, from distributed storage. And I think, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, like my concern is that a lot of the analysis that we have, the electrification analyses, the distribution system planning that the utilities currently are doing, and I'm following PSC's distribution system planning process, so maybe this will change, but that right now we tend to look at electrification more so as a liability essentially on the system and as a burden on the system. So more EVs, higher load? What are we going to do to respond to the peak? More electrified heating and cooling and water heating. How are we going to respond to peak, as opposed to looking at them as a potential asset also for managing load, shaving peaks, demand response, and so on. And so I guess, can you hear me? I think there's a question, Ben, about if you can hear us. I'm not, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so sorry. So I guess and I think that, so my question is, one is, how do we integrate both the consideration of this electrification as load balancing and peak shaving potential, resiliency potential. But the second question is, really, how do we start thinking about our policies? We did pass a bill this year that sort of partially supports moving towards some of this time of use and bidirectional charging and those kinds of things. But how do we really get our policies right now so that as we do the build out, we're setting ourselves up for that possibility. And I still really haven't seen studies that are looking at that electrification as an asset. I'm primarily seeing it as a sort of liability, so to speak. So I'm just wondering if you can talk about what you currently have considers that or creates the possibility for that kind of modeling. And then it is my hope that that's a big piece of what this committee will be able to work on and sort of drive policy in that direction.
So that's a really terrific question. We have been working with ARPA-E and the U.S. Department of Energy on a project for using electric water heaters and HVAC systems as virtual batteries, such that, for example, with an HVAC system in the summer, you could pre-cool things prior to the peak period. And from the grid's point of view, that distributed energy resource essentially looks like a battery. There are certainly questions in terms of how you muster thousands or even millions of homes to do that. But this is something, I think this is really a good example of the sort of pleasant surprises that may await us, in that the system of 20 or 30 years from now, it's possible that most resources will be distributed behind the meter resources rather than centralized resources. I say that as a possibility that we want to accommodate and be sure we take full advantage of if it does turn out to be the case. So I have a geothermal heat pump myself, and electric vehicles, which now are not taking advantage of for that purpose. So I have a personal interest in actually seeing this happen. And the megawatts that are there, and what they could deliver in terms of performance, and the costs and issues in terms of things such as consumer control, battery degradation, which is an important issue to consider, are all things that I think should be recognized as well. And so in this study, we should not only be looking at lithium ion or whatever central battery type deployment might be useful for the grid, but also virtual power plants made from aggregations, as you point out, of distributed energy resources.
Yeah, well, so thank you. And I think you're doing the modeling and I write the policy. So yeah, I try not to hope. I try to direct things. And so I think with your ability to model for us, I mean, I think then it becomes our responsibility to write the policy so that becomes the outcome. Right. So that becomes the outcome, right? I mean, we create markets by the policies we write. So I think we can make that happen. And I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the work group? All right, thank you. And that transitions really into the conversation I'd like us to have on the work plan for the for the meetings ahead, as well as what we might expect coming out of this. Is there, so as I noted earlier, we're meeting every 4 weeks. The expectation is that the June meeting, the June 18th meeting, will be in person. I think it's very valuable for us to essentially break bread. There's no substitute for getting in a room together, PayBam old school. And we will set that site and get that out to you shortly. But with that in mind, with these every 4 week check-ins, every 4 week meetings, certainly, as Professor Hobbs noted, checking in with where the progress of the study. I would argue, and I'd posit that perhaps every second meeting, so the July 16th meeting, the September 10th meeting, and the November 5th meeting, we devote substantial amount of time for that overview and insight into where that study is going, the progress they're making. Is that anybody on the work group find that not appropriate, or is that the right call to make? All right, seeing no objections. And then if we intend as a work group to make recommendations to the commission at large, and I would posit that that's what our outcome should be here. Is there an interest on teeing up for each of our meetings, topic areas, perhaps having presentations on discrete topics, as Delegate Charkoudian noted, whether we devote time for a deep view on integration, resource planning, the bidirectional nature, what that means for resilience. Just as an example, is there an interest in developing policies on or recommendations on policies for backup storage or transmission? I throw it out to the committee for the work group to place anything into for us to discuss. So
Feel free to turn on your camera, by the way.
Landon, anybody else? I see you came up. Landon, please, you have the floor.
I think some topical discussions and some leadership there would be valuable. In particular, in addition to battery storage as a DER, I think addressing battery storage as a transmission asset could be valuable.
Delegate Charkoudian?
Thank you. Yes, and this will be my last comment. I do need to pop off for another meeting. Thanks. I agree. I also would say we have we started the conversation battery storage in avoiding RMR. Also, we started that conversation, and we have started that conversation with PJM. They've been especially difficult on this, as they are on most creative solutions. But I think it would be valuable for us to sort of move that conversation and analysis forward. We have the current RMR at Brandon Shores, but also potentially other RMR on its way. And so transmission asset would be one piece of it, but then specifically as an avoidance of RMR, I think is another component we might want to take a look at.
Yeah, and if I may expand on Delegate Charkoudian's point, the RMR is the reliability must run obligation that PJM's analysis says that as Wagner closes down, if it were to, and Brandon Shores were to close down, as both have made clear they intend to do, the analysis out of PJM is that would present reliability issues, particularly in the Baltimore area. And the solution that PJM has put forward is building more wire, is bringing more wire from out-of-state generation, particularly coming in from southeastern Pennsylvania into the Baltimore region. And that I don't want to misstate the ticket cost on that, but it's in the billions, or it's $1 billion plus or minus. And then the RMR requires that the units continue to run until those wires are built, say by 2029 or 2030, 2031. And so that has cost implications for ratepayers as well in the interim, as well as those units will continue to emit, which has the deleterious impact on and air quality, et cetera, that we're aware of. Was that helpful, Delegate Charkoudian, to give the background on that?
Yeah, and there's some very specific, I won't get into them now, but there's been some analysis, and then really to look at a very real possibility that one could avoid the RMR part, not necessarily avoid the transmission, not necessarily avoid the $800 million transmission build, but possibly avoid the RMR itself or portions of the RMR with battery storage. And so I think that there's more work that we could do on that because we have other, Chalk Point will be next soon, somewhere along the lines. If the data centers jump behind the fence at Calvert Cliffs, then we have another reliability issue. So it will be really important to kind of get our head around this question of, as plants are coming offline, whether because of shutting down or because of data center co-location with existing plants, we have massive reliability issues. And I think just having a really clear sense of what storage can offer in response to that, and then also just from a reliability perspective, and then also the avoided costs, bringing massive amounts of storage on, and that potentially adds to reliability, but also avoids either transmission build costs as a sort of non-wire alternative, but also avoids potentially the need for some portions of an RMR.
Okay, thank you. And to that point, would it be useful perhaps for the June meeting to have a presentation on those global questions, the data center demands, the long-term outlook for impacts on resiliency and reliability, as to tee up our own conversation for policy development coming out of that on June 18th? Okay. Any working group member thoughts on that, or are we good to tee that up for June 18th?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great conversation.
All right. Thank you. All right. And I see the note from Senator Hester as well. All right. I will take it upon us to set that presentation up. All right. Thank you, Delegate Charkoudian. Then all right. Maury Simpson has raised his hand.
Yeah, so well, before the delegate left, I know there was a conversation around the $800 million transmission build out, RMR. Would this body be in the position to talk about the acceleration of the build out of transmission? I mean, we know we need it. It's just the result of delayed planning. We knew that these retirements were going to happen, and the relevant parties had a responsibility to conduct to get this stuff up and running. So where does that fit into the work of this group?
I might posit that should we do that as a stepwise? If we tee up for June 18th, the broad conversation, not just limited in the RMR, but the implications of all of this coming on, the data centers, et cetera. So we're having the conversation about an elucidation of what the structural challenges might be. And if we do that on the 18th, would it make sense then to stepwise say, all right, let's have a conversation on the July meeting on whether there's policy development in that narrow, somewhat narrower subject matter of transmission. If I'm understanding your point, Maurice, about are you thinking about needs to streamline to have greater efficiency on build out of transmission?
Yes.
Okay. With that, for the work group members, does that make sense then to tee that up for the July 16th? That will sort of decant out of the June 18th conversation? Okay. All right, we will do so. That's very helpful for that July 18th meeting. Sorry, July 16th meeting. And Delegate Charkoudian also raised the sort of more specific points about bidirectional distributed generation, et cetera. My instinct would be that would potentially be a piece of recommendation that we would bring forward to the commission at large. So is that a separate conversation, say, for August 13th? That might be a valuable piece to do that discrete conversation, narrow conversation, with the intent of developing over the weeks after that recommendations for the commission. Any objections? Do you think that makes sense for the August 13th meeting?
I did want to make a quick point, which is that all the recommendations per working group, including this working group, will go to the entire commission for consideration and voting, and only the ones that are approved will make it into the annual report to the governor and General Assembly.
Thank you, Cindy. Maurice, raise your hand.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. So we're discussing the topics now for this work group to discuss, and we potentially could come up with recommendations for each of these different topics, and then those will get sent to the full commission for consideration of whether our recommendations from this work group that they adopt would then move forward. Right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this work group does have an obligation to provide the commission as well as the General Assembly with the study that we're undertaking with Professor Hobbs and crew. But that's the only piece that we unilaterally distribute. Other than that, our obligation is very precisely to stay within our lane of recommendations to the commission at large.
Got it. Thank you so much. And with that, I do have to drop as well. So please excuse me.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Clearly, that's already a significant amount of charge in the next months ahead. But are there other discrete topics that work group members want to bring up raise at this particular juncture? Okay. Yeah, and I would note that that is a large charge that coming up for the June 18th meeting. That is a significant lift, and I have no fear that will consume our time, and that much will decant out of that discussion on June 18th. Any other process questions from the work group members? All right, and as I hopefully made note at the top of this conversation, expected we'll have bilaterals in the days and weeks ahead to as we develop granular details of what we're thinking about here. And please also reach out to myself as the chair, and we can disseminate conversations around the working group members as well, as we build out the work body, the body of work ahead of us. Seeing no more questions and comments from the working group members, I would like to open it up for public comment. It's 12 minutes after 10 o'clock. If there are members of the public that would like to contribute, please do so. Raise your hand if you might, and I'll recognize the person. So with that, any comments from the public?
No comments.
Yeah. All right. Seeing no comments from the public, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. It's just have tremendous respect for all of you that joined this and your willingness to contribute to this effort. Public service is much appreciated. And we will stay in touch and very much look forward to the work ahead, particularly with the volume of work we've teed up for the June 18th meeting. Again, thank you, and look forward to seeing as many of you as possible for the in-person on that day.